Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and ladies and gentlemen of the House this morning. You know, we've heard a lot of comments from folks of both political parties. And, I've sat here and I've put my thoughts to this. Is this legislation needed? No, it's not. But is it needed? Yes, it is. Because of the politics that surround the homestead property tax relief. I was fortunate enough that I was here back 10 years or so ago when it was passed, and I want to tell you why this bill was passed, or the policies of the homestead property tax relief. Back in the 90s, Governor Barnes, like so many, understood that we had a major problem in this state dealing with property taxes and all those things that surround it, from valuation to assessments to millages. And we passed a sizable package of what we called at that time, I think it was the Property Taxpayers' Bill of Rights. And even though, like so many things that we do legislatively, it didn't work because property taxes still continued to escalate. So Governor Barnes at that time came up with the idea of the homestead property tax relief. And it was to use surplus funds. And hear what I'm telling you, it was to use surplus funds to fund this. That's the reason that the premise of this, if you look and it says that this homestead property tax relief will be funded subject to availability and of appropriations. Now, I'll have to tell you, at that particular time, we had a whole different mentality in the General Assembly and on the second floor of this State House. While monies were being spent and pork barrel projects were always there, not to the extravagant limit that they have become in most recent years. Now, we all know that somebody had asked the question a while ago about the deficit this year. Yeah, we've got a deficit, all right. This state's in a situation I've never seen and never thought I would ever live to see. My state almost become a Southern California in the process and how we're standing right now. Why is this bill necessary, or why did my good friend from Warner Robins put it in? To send a message, quite honestly, that we need to do what we said we were going to do. Last year in the budget we appropriated, and it created somewhat of a major issue because the way it was presented in the budget, that those local governments, they computed that into their budgets and into their tax bills. So the bottom line, that the actions of this General Assembly, by passing a budget, we've created another series of problems for local officials. So we certainly do need to fund that. Do we need a bill to do it? No, we don't need a bill, but it's just a good policy message that needs to go out. A lot of the questions that I hear from my friends that have spoken here before about that this is a tax increase for next year, hogwash. That's not a tax increase. You better look in the mirror if you want to talk about tax increases. Let me tell you something. Anybody that's voted for the budgets of the last several years, you voted for tax increases. Every time you voted for a budget that cut the QB funding, you voted to raise your local property taxes. When does tax increases become a vote on a budget? It's been that way. Whenever you pass unfunded mandates, shame on you for making an issue out of this. The one thing that I heard from speaker after speaker, regardless of their political party, was that property owners need some relief. You're darn right they need some relief. They can't stand much more of the prosperity that they've been levied in this state, especially over the last 6 years. Where is this $428 million going to come from, ladies and gentlemen? The gentleman asked a question earlier about the $2.2 billion that we're short this year. Truth is, if you look past the smoke in the mirrors, then you'll find out you're probably closer to $3 billion in the red. If you look at all these slick accounting techniques that are being used, like reducing health insurance pools and cutting the employer contribution and shifting more costs down to state employees on their match to health insurance and this type of stuff. But yes, we're in a problem. The problem wasn't just created by the recession that we're in. The problem has been created by everyone in the General Assembly who did not show fiscal restraint during the good times. That's where this lies. Do we need this? No, we don't need it. Is it a message to the second floor? Yes, it is. Do we need that second part of tying it to 3%? Let me tell you something. The truth is, as long as you're spending money like, as Ronald Reagan said, the drunken sailors, you're never going to have a surplus to pass it along. So what I would implore this body to do is, you're going to vote your conviction. You may vote down party lines or you may not vote down party lines. But let this bill be a good example for y'all when you're looking at the budget this year. I've been very one who's complained quite a bit about the mental attitude of the General Assembly. I came in at a time that there's one thing that I learned lessons under Tom Murphy, and that was the independence of this House. That every member of this House has got a right to be heard regardless of your party. That every member of this House has got a right to think for yourself. And no matter what they've said about the past, even if you were a member of the Democratic Party that was in control at that time, Tom Murphy never punished anyone for thinking for themselves. And that's what I would implore this group to do here today. I would also pass something on as my feelings to the leadership. That we have major problems, ladies and gentlemen, with this budget. Didn't just occur this year. We've had problems because we have a systemic problem with the budget and the process. We need to reach into this budget this year. We need to take whatever time is necessary, and the appropriations committees of both of these bodies need to get together. You can't do a full Z-based process, but they need to take whatever time is necessary to correct the systemic ails of the budget process and of the revenue cycles in this state. We need to scrutinize at every program, every privatized contract, and find out why this state budget has increased 43% in the last 7 budgets. How is it that we have transferred, by cutting the QB funding, by the policies that's been put forth, over $2 billion from what this state once paid for public education, that we've transferred over $2 billion if the proposals in this budget this year passes downstream to the school boards, and they only have one place that they can raise that money, and that's off of the property owners of this state. So I would ask the members of this House to take a good look at this. Take a good look in the mirror at your own selves when you're voting, whether you're told to vote a certain way or whatever you're told to do. But when does the vote on a budget become a tax increase? It has been that way for the last several years. We've got problems that we've got to deal with, ladies and gentlemen. We've got major problems. And I would implore this body to stand up and let's move forward with the budget and start asking the questions. And if you don't like the questions, if you don't like the answers that you see, then I would tell you to vote against the budget and force it to a compromise of this entire body. I hear friends of both sides of the aisle say what they do and they don't like, but I've also heard them say, well, I got to vote for the budget because I got a little bit of pork in my home district. Well, you know what? I could rightly care about what goes to your home district, but I am concerned that when this state is put on the table to close 3 GBI laboratories, those labs, that's the backbone behind all law enforcement prosecution in this state. Or when I hear a Supreme Court justice that comes to the Appropriations Committee, as he did yesterday, and he talks about elevators that don't work and water fountains in the judicial building, the highest court of this state, that they've got black trash bags draped over the water fountains. or that they can't repair a fax machine in the Supreme Court offices. I am ashamed that this state has reached this proportion. So the questions to me are, do we continue to play the games, or do we get on with it, ladies and gentlemen? I would encourage you to look at this bill closely, put the political spin aside, and let's do what's right.